A drunk client offered a $50 tip to a delivery driver in front of the condo. David, a single father, refused the money. The next day, his son's school principal called urgently. The reason for the call changed everything. David Miller was 38 and knew every street, every traffic light, every building entrance in Los Angeles, as if they were extensions of his own home. Working as a delivery driver for 3 years, he had developed a routine that started at 6 a.m. and only ended when he hit his daily goal of $100, an amount that barely covered the basic expenses for him and his 12-year-old son, Ethan. Ethan attended a small private school, one of the few achievements David had managed to maintain after his ex-wife left, leaving only a letter explaining she couldn't live that life of financial strain anymore. On that rainy Thursday in October, David was on his 10th delivery of the day when he received an order for a high-end condominium in Bel Air. The apartment was on the top floor, and the elevator was out of service. Climbing 16 flights of stairs with hot food was a challenge he had faced hundreds of times, but it always left his back aching for days. When he finally reached apartment 1604, he was out of breath, and his uniform was damp with sweat, despite the rain outside. The man who opened the door was visibly intoxicated. Disheveled clothes, red eyes, a strong whiskey breath. He must have been around 45, with a prominent belly spilling out of an expensive dress shirt. Behind him, David could see a spacious living room with designer furniture, a gigantic TV tuned to some reality TV show. The contrast with the 2-room apartment where David lived with Ethan was stark, but he was used to these differences. 3 years of deliveries had taught him that Los Angeles was a city of parallel worlds that rarely touched. "Finally, I thought you guys got lost," the man said, swaying slightly. "What took you so long?" David quickly checked the app. He was within the estimated time, as always. He prided himself on never being late for deliveries, even if it meant taking risks in traffic or climbing endless staircases like that one. "Sorry, sir. The elevator is out of service. I had to walk up, but the food is still hot," David replied, carefully handing over the insulated bag. The man took the containers and carelessly placed them on a coffee table, already cluttered with empty bottles and dirty glasses. It was then that something happened that David would never forget. The man walked back to the door, pulled a $50 bill from his pocket, and held it out to David with a crooked smile. "Here, take this. You guys need it more than I do," he said, waving the bill in the air. "Consider it a handout for the needy." David felt the blood rush to his face. It wasn't just the amount. It was the way the man spoke, as if he were giving charity to a beggar. The condescension in his voice, the way he waved the money as if David were a pet waiting for a treat. 3 years of honest work. 3 years of waking before dawn to ensure Ethan had food on the table and a clean uniform for school. 3 years of being treated as invisible by most customers. And now this. "Thanks, but I can't accept it," David said, taking a step back. His voice came out firmer than he expected. "You've already paid for the order through the app. That's enough." The man laughed, an unpleasant sound that echoed through the empty hallway. "What nonsense is that? It's $50. What do you guys make? Like $5 a run? Don't be so proud." He tried to push the bill into David's hand, but David stepped back again. "Really, thank you for the offer, but I can't accept it. Have a good night," David repeated, already heading for the stairs. He could hear the man muttering behind him as he descended the first steps. "These guys don't know a good opportunity when they see one." As he descended the 16 floors, David questioned his decision at least 10 times. $50 represented more than half a day's work. With that money, he could buy school supplies for Ethan, maybe even pay for that eye doctor appointment the boy needed. But something inside him refused to accept that tip. Not in that way, not with that implicit humiliation. David got home around 11 p.m., as always. Ethan was already asleep. He had left a note on the kitchen table saying he had done his math homework and put dinner in the fridge. It was a routine they had developed, Ethan taking on responsibilities no 12-year-old should have, and David arriving too late to check if his son was truly okay, if he didn't need help, if he didn't feel lonely in that small, silent apartment. As he heated up the plate of pasta Ethan had prepared, David couldn't stop thinking about the scene at the condo. $50. The money he refused was equivalent to what Ethan spent monthly on school lunches. It was almost 2 weeks' worth of gas for his motorcycle. It was equivalent to not having to make those extra deliveries on weekends, when he could have been helping his son with homework or just talking to him. But every time he imagined taking that bill from the drunk man's hand, he felt the same knot in his stomach. It wasn't about the money. It was about what the money represented. It was about being seen as someone deserving of pity, as a social problem to be solved with handouts. David worked 14 hours a day precisely so he wouldn't need anyone's charity, to be able to look in the mirror and recognize himself as a man who supported his family with dignity. The night was difficult. David tossed and turned, mentally calculating how they would pay the electricity bill that would arrive soon, thinking about the conversation he needed to have with Ethan about saving on school lunches. At 5 in the morning, he gave up on sleeping and went to make coffee. Ethan appeared in the kitchen half an hour later, already in uniform, backpack on his back. "Dad, Ms. Jenkins said she needs to talk to you," Ethan said, chewing on toast. Ms. Jenkins was the school secretary, a kind woman who always treated David with respect, unlike some parents who barely disguised their disdain when they saw him at meetings. The only man in simple clothes amidst well-dressed women and imported cars in the parking lot. "Talk about what?" David asked, feeling a tightness in his chest. Had they found out he was 2 months behind on tuition payments? Was Ethan having problems at school and not telling him not to worry him? "I don't know. She just said it was important. She said the principal wants to talk to you too." Ethan quickly finished his toast and grabbed his backpack. "Dad, is everything okay? You look worried." David forced a smile. "It's all right, son. It's probably just something about paperwork or quarterly activities." But inside, his heart pounded. A meeting with the principal was never good news, especially when you were already 2 months behind on tuition and trying to negotiate a payment plan. After Ethan left for school, David stood in the kitchen, looking at his phone. It was still too early to call the school, but too late to go back to sleep. He decided to start his workday earlier. Maybe he could get a few extra deliveries before lunchtime, when traffic always picked up. At 8 o'clock sharp, the phone rang. It was the school. "Good morning, Mr. Miller. This is Ms. Jenkins, the secretary. Principal Henderson would like to speak with you today if possible. It's about Ethan, but don't worry, it's nothing serious." Her voice sounded strange, almost emotional. "Of course, I can come right now," David replied, turning off the motorcycle he was preparing for another day of work. During the 20-minute drive through traffic to the school, his mind conjured dozens of scenarios. Ethan fighting with classmates, low grades, inappropriate behavior. Or worse, maybe someone at school had discovered their financial situation and wanted to talk about scholarships or transfers. When he arrived at the school, Ms. Jenkins received him with a smile he couldn't decipher. "The principal is waiting for you in his office. You can go straight up." Principal Henderson's office always intimidated David. Not because of its size, it was small and welcoming, but because of what it represented. Diplomas on the walls, education books, photos of smiling graduates from previous years. It was an academic world David admired from afar, a world he wanted Ethan to achieve, but one he himself had never managed to reach. He had dropped out of school at 16 to help support his family when his father lost his job, and since then, life had never given him a second chance. Mr. Henderson was in his early 50s, with graying hair and a gentle way of speaking that always put David at ease. Unlike some educators David had met, Mr. Henderson never made him feel inferior for being a blue-collar worker or for not having a college degree. But at that moment, the principal seemed different. There was a seriousness in his expression that David couldn't interpret. "David, thank you for coming. Please, have a seat," Mr. Henderson said, indicating the chair in front of his desk. "First, I want you to know that Ethan is doing very well in school. His grades are excellent, and his teachers have nothing but praise." David felt a momentary relief, but Mr. Henderson continued. "Actually, the reason for this meeting isn't exactly about Ethan. It's about you." David's heart quickened again. Had they found out about the overdue tuition? Did someone at school know about his financial struggles? "Principal, if this is about the payments, I can explain." "No, it's not about that," Mr. Henderson interrupted him, with a small smile. "David, do you know Mr. Michael Thompson? He's Olivia's father, one of Ethan's classmates." David frowned, trying to remember. Michael Thompson. The name sounded familiar, but he knew few parents at the school. He always rushed to meetings, between one delivery and another, and left right after. He didn't have time to socialize at the gate like the mothers did. "I don't recall, Principal. Why?" Mr. Henderson stood up and walked to the window overlooking the schoolyard. "Michael reached out to me yesterday afternoon. He was, how can I put it, very shaken." The principal turned to David. "He told me about an encounter you two had the night before last." David felt the world spin. The night before last. The drunk man at the condo. The client who offered the $50. "Principal, I can explain. David, let me finish, Mr. Henderson said, sitting back down. Michael told me he was going through a very difficult time in his life, marriage problems, a lot of stress at work, and he admitted he was drinking more than he should have. The principal paused. He said that when you arrived with the food, he wasn't behaving in the best way. David remained silent, not knowing what to say. Where was this conversation going? Michael told me he offered you extra money, in a way that, well, he himself admitted was disrespectful, and that you refused. Mr. Henderson leaned forward. David, he was impressed by your attitude. He said he spent the entire night thinking about it, about how a man who clearly needed the money had the dignity to refuse when the offer was made in a humiliating way. David blinked, trying to process the information. The drunk man was the father of Ethan's classmate, and he had contacted the school. Michael told me he looked into you. He found out you're a single father, that you work as a delivery driver to support Ethan, that your son is one of the best students in his class. Mr. Henderson smiled. He was ashamed of his own behavior and impressed by your character. Principal, I don't understand where this is going, David said, feeling confused. David, Michael is a partner in a logistics company, a large company that operates with its own and third-party fleets. Mr. Henderson paused meaningfully. He wants to offer you a job, a real job, with full-time employment, benefits, fixed hours. He said he needs people of integrity on his team, people who won't sell out for any price. David felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. A stable job? Full-time employment? After 3 years riding under sun and rain, facing traffic, climbing stairs, being treated as invisible? He wants to talk to you today, if you're interested. The next 2 hours passed in a blur in David's mind. Mr. Henderson explained that Michael Thompson was a managing partner at Logie Trans, a company that managed delivery fleets for large retailers. The company was expanding and needed team supervisors, people who understood the reality of the streets, who knew how to deal with delivery drivers and couriers, who had practical experience in the day-to-day of urban logistics. Michael said something that really struck me. Mr. Henderson continued. He said his company hires many people with MBAs and degrees, but they were missing someone who truly knew what it meant to deliver a product on the last mile, someone who understood the real challenges of the workers. David could barely believe what he was hearing. For 3 years, he had felt invisible, just one among thousands of anonymous delivery drivers circulating through the city. He never imagined his experience could be seen as valuable, as a professional qualification. Mr. Henderson handed him a card with Logitrans's address and Michael's direct phone number. He's expecting your call. David, can I give you a piece of advice? Go in with confidence. You have a lot to offer. When he left the school, David was so emotional he had to stop at a coffee shop to process everything. He ordered a simple coffee and stared at the business card for long minutes. Michael Thompson, managing partner. The same man who, the previous Thursday, had been drunk, offering money condescendingly, was now a gateway to a completely different life. At 2 in the afternoon, David was in the reception area of Logitrans, a modern commercial building in Century City. 20 stories of glass and steel, fast elevators, well-dressed receptionists. He had stopped home to change clothes, putting on the only dress shirt he owned and the fabric pants he usually only wore for school meetings. Michael came down personally to pick him up from the reception. He was sober, well-dressed, with a serious but respectful demeanor. Nothing like the swaying man from 2 days ago. They went up to the 10th floor, where the company's headquarters were located. Through the corridors, David saw performance charts, delivery route maps, employees in meetings discussing logistics. It was a world he knew from below, the streets, the traffic, the impossible deadlines. But he had never seen it from above, from the perspective of those who plan and coordinate everything. In Michael's office, an entire wall was covered with monitors showing real-time deliveries across Greater Los Angeles. Red, blue, and green dots moved across the map, representing trucks, vans, and motorcycles like the one David rode every day. David, I'm going to be direct with you, Michael said, indicating a chair in front of his desk. The company is growing very fast. We have contracts with major retail chains, e-commerce, pharmacies, but we're having problems with driver turnover, delays, and team dissatisfaction. David nodded. He knew these problems well. He had worked for different apps, seen colleagues quit due to pressure, lack of recognition, and risks on the streets. I need someone who understands this reality to coordinate our third-party teams. Someone who can speak the language of the drivers, who understands their challenges, who can be a bridge between management and operations. Michael paused. "Your attitude the other night showed me that you are exactly the type of person I'm looking for." David was confused. "I don't understand, Mr. Thompson. I just refused a tip." "Exactly. You refused money you clearly needed because the way it was offered offended your dignity. That told me two important things about you. First, that you have solid principles. Second, that you understand the value of respect in the workplace." Michael stood up. "David, I'm offering you a position as an operations supervisor. Starting salary of $4,500 a month, plus benefits, meal stipend, health insurance, and a retirement plan, along with paid vacation." David felt his voice vanish. $4,500, more than double what he could make as a delivery driver, not to mention the benefits, not to mention the dignity of a formal job, fixed hours, the chance to have dinner with Ethan every night. "Do you accept and start on Monday?" David arrived home that afternoon with a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. True hope. Ethan was still at school, so he had a few hours alone to process everything that had happened. He sat at the small kitchen table and stared at the employment contract Michael had given him, still incredulous that it was real. $4,500 a month. Health insurance for him and Ethan, a meal stipend, paid vacation, an annual bonus. These were concepts that had become abstract in his life after 3 years in the gig economy. David barely remembered what it was like to have stability, to be able to plan for the future without worrying if his motorcycle would break down the next day or if there would be enough orders to pay the bills. When Ethan arrived home from school at 5 in the afternoon, David was preparing a special snack, chocolate chip cookies, those treats the boy loved, but they rarely bought because they were expensive. "Dad, what's the celebration?" Ethan asked, throwing his backpack on the couch and approaching the table. David smiled. "Sit down here, son. I need to tell you something." Over the next 15 minutes, David told Ethan about the conversation at school, about Michael Thompson, about the new job. The boy listened in silence, eyes wide, asking specific questions. When David finished, Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "Dad, does this mean you won't have to work late anymore?" was the first question he asked. "That's right, son. I'll work from 8 to 6, Monday through Friday. Weekends free. I'll be able to help you with your homework. We'll be able to have lunch together on Saturday." Ethan hugged David with a strength that surprised him. "I missed you, Dad," the boy said, his voice muffled against his chest. "I know you worked so hard for my sake, but I missed you." David had to swallow his tears. For 3 years, he had convinced himself that he was doing his best for Ethan, working 16 hours a day to ensure his son had what he needed. But he had neglected something fundamental: his presence. The boy needed a present father more than he needed money. On Monday, David arrived at Logie Trans at 7:30 in the morning, half an hour before the agreed time. Michael received him personally and introduced him to the teams. The company had 200 direct employees and coordinated over 1,000 third-party drivers across Los Angeles. David's role would be to supervise 5 delivery teams, each responsible for a different region of the city. He would be the link between the drivers on the streets and central coordination, solving operational problems, negotiating with dissatisfied clients, training new drivers. "David, you'll find that your street experience is worth more than any MBA course," said Sarah, the operations manager, a 40-year-old woman who coordinated all logistics. "The drivers will respect you because they know you've been in their shoes." And that's exactly what happened. In the first few weeks, David realized he could resolve conflicts that other supervisors couldn't. When a driver complained about an impossible route, David understood exactly what he was talking about. When a client demanded unrealistic deadlines, David knew how to argue based on the practical reality of deliveries. 6 months later, his team had the best satisfaction ratings in the company. Driver turnover on his routes had dropped dramatically, and Michael was already talking about a new promotion. But what was most important to David wasn't the company's numbers. It was coming home at 7 in the evening and finding Ethan doing homework at the kitchen table. It was being able to help the boy with math, talk about his day at school, watch a movie together on the weekend. It was having discovered that refusing a humiliating $50 tip had been worth a decent $4,500 monthly salary. That defending his dignity in a difficult moment had opened doors he didn't even know existed. David never again had to climb 16 flights of stairs to deliver food. But when he saw delivery drivers in traffic, in the rain, racing against the clock, he felt deep respect. He knew exactly what those men and women faced every day. And now, from his new position, he did everything he could to make their work a little more dignified, a little more respectful. Because dignity, David had learned, cannot be bought with a tip. It is earned with character. Sometimes, the hardest decisions in life are those we make when no one is looking. David could have taken that $50. No one would have known, no one would have judged, but he knew. And it was that silent integrity that transformed a refusal into an opportunity, a humiliation into recognition. Ethan grew up seeing his father work with dignity, understanding that a person's worth is not measured by the money they possess, but by the character they demonstrate when tested. Years later, when the boy graduated with an engineering degree, with a scholarship he earned through his own merit, he would say that the greatest lesson his father taught him didn't come from words, but from example. David continued at Logitrans, eventually becoming director of operations. But he never forgot where he came from, never lost the humility of someone who knows the weight of every mile traveled, every stair climbed, every customer served with respect. And whenever someone asked about the secret to his success, he gave the same answer. Dignity is not negotiable, not for $50, not for 100,000.